Okay, so you want to own a coffee shop. Exposed brick, hanging pendant lights, the hiss of the espresso machine, a regular who orders the usual before you even ask. You picture mornings where the door chimes, the smell of fresh grounds fills the room, and laptop workers linger for hours, which somehow feels like community instead of a business problem. That's the dream. It's not a bad dream. Here's the problem. That laptop worker lingering for 3 hours over one $5 latte isn't charming. He's occupying a seat that could have turned over 4 more times that morning. A coffee shop is not really a coffee business. It's a seat turnover and labor scheduling business that happens to sell you hot water and beans for 4 times what they cost. Once you understand that, everything about why coffee shops are everywhere and why so many quietly disappear starts to make sense. Coffee shop isn't one business, it's several wearing the same apron. A coffee cart or kiosk can open for $25,000 to $50,000. A drive-through only shop, no seating, pure throughput, runs $100,000 to $250,000. The traditional seated cafe, the version most people picture, runs $100,000 to $350,000. A full cafe with both seating and a drive-through can push past $400,000. Each is a different bet on the same question. Are you selling speed or a place to sit? You'd think the expensive part is the espresso machine. It isn't. A commercial two-group machine runs $10,000 to $20,000, and a full equipment package lands between $20,000 and $80,000. The real expense is the space. Build-out runs $150 to $300 per square foot, so a modest 1,200 square foot cafe can mean $180,000 to $360,000 in construction alone. Taking over a space that already has plumbing and a grease trap can save $50,000 or more. That detail, whether the lease comes with existing infrastructure, can be the difference between opening lean and opening underwater. Add rent deposits, build-out, equipment, initial inventory, permits, a point-of-sale system, and 3 to 6 months of working capital, and a modest cafe can require $100,000 to well over $300,000 before the first cup is sold. That's the price of admission. Now, what happens after the doors open? Because this is where the dream and the spreadsheet disagree. The single biggest number determining survival is rent as a percentage of revenue. Healthy food service operations keep that near 6 to 10%. Shops in trouble usually let it creep toward 15 or 20, almost always because the owner fell for a location before running the math on whether the foot traffic there could support the rent. A gorgeous corner spot might rent for $8,000 to $12,000 a month, which only works if the shop can ring up $80,000 to $150,000 a month to keep that percentage safe. Most owners run that math after signing the lease, not before. Here's what catches almost everyone off guard, and it has nothing to do with coffee. A food service permit can require a full kitchen inspection, even for shops that only sell pastries baked elsewhere. Background music, which almost every cafe plays, legally requires a public performance license, the same requirement that trips up gym owners, running $1,000 to $4,000 a year combined. Skip it, and an unlicensed music claim can run into the tens of thousands. None of it's on the equipment catalog. All of it's buried in paperwork nobody reads until a letter shows up. Now the part that explains everything else. The cup itself. One customer orders a plain drip coffee, pays $2, leaves in 90 seconds. Another orders a loaded latte, a croissant, and a bag of beans to go, spends $18 and is gone in 4 minutes. The raw ingredient cost on the drink, cost of goods, typically runs 25 to 30% of the sales price. Healthy on the drink alone, but food and retail add-ons, pastries, bagged beans, merch, carry fatter margins because no barista labor is tied up making them to order. This is why surviving shops push hard on the pastry case and the retail shelf. The espresso machine gets people in the door. The bag of beans on the shelf is where the real margin quietly builds. Labor punishes shops built around long dwell times. Baristas run from minimum wage up to $18 or $20 an hour in expensive markets, and a seated cafe typically needs 2 to 4 staff on the floor during peak hours. Labor commonly runs 25 to 35% of revenue. Add that to a 25 to 30% cost of goods, and 55 to 65 cents of every dollar is gone before rent, utilities, or a single dollar of profit. That's why the customer customer camped out for 3 hours is, in the coldest accounting sense, a problem. That seat could have turned over 3 or 4 times in the same window. That's the twist at the heart of this business. It isn't really selling coffee, it's renting seats by the transaction. A shop with 15 tables that turns each 3 times during the morning rush is doing the financial equivalent of 45 tables that only turned once. The shops that succeed obsess over throughput. The ones that struggle lean into coziness and never ask how long a customer is allowed to sit before the math breaks. The honest survival numbers are sobering. Research consistently puts independent coffee shop failure somewhere between 50 and 74% within 5 years, with first-year closures ranging from roughly 1 in 6 to as high as half depending on the survey. Close to 40,000 coffee shops operate in the U.S., and one chain alone accounts for around 40% of that total. The market isn't shrinking, but the competitive gravity around it is enormous. Owners who make it treat year 1 as an extended setup phase, not a verdict, and consider 10 to 15% net profit by year 2 a genuinely healthy outcome. Picture a modest 1,200 square foot cafe. Rent $6,000 a month, labor $18,000, cost of goods 28% of sales, overhead $3,000. At $60,000 in monthly revenue, costs land around $43,800, leaving $16,200, about 27%, before the owner's draw and loan payments. A real survivable business with almost no room for a bad month. Now, the realistic bad year. A chain opens 2 blocks away and pulls 15% of morning traffic. The city raises minimum wage, pushing labor to 35%. Bean and milk prices rise, nudging cost of goods to 33%. None of these alone would sink the shop. Together, on revenue that slipped to $57,000, costs climbed to $49,800, leaving $7,200, about 13%, before debt service. Once the loan payment comes out, that shop is at break-even or worse. No fire, no scandal, just a slightly busier competitor and a slightly heavier wage bill, compounding quietly. The shops that fail rarely fail because the coffee was bad. They fail because rent crept too high, because labor wasn't scheduled around real traffic, because the owner fell for a cozy space without asking how many times it needed to turn over every morning just to cover the light bill. Community doesn't pay the lease. Transactions per seat per hour pays the lease. So if you open a coffee shop, remember what actually determines whether you make it. It was never about how good your espresso is. It's about how honestly you can look at your floor plan and ask how many times every seat needs to turn over before you're allowed to call it a living room instead of a business.